So for this question, it says a table to show the number of participants who perceive the ambiguous image as a monkey or as a teapot from both conditions. So we've got image presented with animals and image presented with kitchen items. So basically, an ambiguous image is one where you can't really tell what it is. And what they've done is they've presented somebody with animals, and then they've got the ambiguous image in there, and they've presented them with kitchen items, and they've got the ambiguous image in there. Now, the theory behind this is if you see lots of animals, then you'll interpret that ambiguous image as an animal because it's priming you to recognise that. And similarly, if you're presented with kitchen items, you're more likely to perceive the teapot because it's primed you with that. Now, this experiment here has two different conditions. So basically they're taking part in one of the conditions of the IV. So this is an independent measures design. It's also collecting nominal data because the data that you get from the participant is whether or not they see a monkey or whether or not they see a teapot. Now in this table it looks like there's interval data because there's numbers in there, but it's actually in categories. The response from the participant would be in words. It would be I see a monkey, I see a teapot, and they've counted how many up. So this is a frequency table, and frequency tables are used for nominal data for data that is in categories. Now it doesn't matter whether you could see that from that table or not because the question asks you what are two reasons for the choice of the chi-squared. So you wouldn't even need to even understand that experiment because it's just asking you for why you'd use a chi-squared. And the two reasons, or three, there is three reasons why you'd use a chi-squared, but it wants two from you. So the first one is that a chi-squared test is looking for a difference between the conditions. So you write down, or they're investigating a difference between being presented with animals and being presented with kitchen items in whether they perceive a monkey or a teapot. That would be your context. So you're getting 1 mark for saying the difference and you're getting 1 mark for the context. Now, the second reason might be that you have an independent measures design in this experiment. So they either take part in the being presented with animals or they take part in the being presented with kitchen items. Again, your context is that second mark. Or another reason that you could have had is that it's collecting nominal data and therefore, again, put the context on. They're asking them, are they perceiving a monkey or are they perceiving a teapot when they're presented with animals or when they're presented with kitchen items. So you've stated the criteria of the chi-squared test and you're giving context for it. So nice and easy question. The next question, question 7, says explain how the expected frequency values for each cell will be calculated before the formula for this inferential test could be used. And this is a step of the chi-squared that you've done in class. And essentially all it was that you had to write was row total times column total divided by overall total. And that was it. You could also have put some examples, so you could have added them up. Some people added up the row total and the column total. So for example, if we go back to the table, you could have had 15 plus 10, getting you 25, so that's a row total, times by the column total. So if you're doing this cell here, it would be 20, and then divided by the overall total. So when you add them all up, what do you get? So that's how you'd answer that question. Nice and straightforward. And then it says, explain how psychologists would determine the appropriate degrees of freedom for this test. Now, that is row, so many rows there are, minus 1. So we've got 2 rows, minus 1, which is 1. And then it's also times by the column total minus 1. So we've got 2 columns, so 2 minus 1 is 1. And so we've got rows minus 1 is 1, columns minus 1 is 1, and 1 times 1 is 1. So the degrees of freedom for this test are 1. So you had to kind of mention the actual formula, but you also had to calculate that in this test it would be 1 because it says for this test. So it wants it in context of the test. Question 9, again, chi-squared again. Now, for a chi-squared to be significant, the observed value has to be greater than the critical value. So in this case, we've got an observed value of 3.8. And they've got critical values in this table. Now, you've been taught that they usually use 0.05, and the critical value here is 2.71. So the observed value is greater than the critical value. So at the significance level of 0.05, which suggests that findings are, there's only about 5% chance, or 5% or less chance of them being due to chance, so extraneous variables, it's significant. And that would have got you some of the marks, maybe 2 of the marks. But what you also need to do is compare it to the next significant level. So either one of these two. Because if you look, This here says 3.84. Now that is greater than the observed value, so it might be significant at 0.05, but it's not significant at 0.025. So it says there that if you analyse it in a bit more detail and suggest that there's only 2.5% due to chance, there isn't a significant difference there. There's only a significant difference at 5%, which means that if you use this significance level, you haven't found a difference. It's only if you use this one that you have. So there must be some extraneous variable there when you analyse it a bit further. So it's great at this level, but not at this one. And you kind of need to kind of make a comment on that. Now, if it's not significant at this level, then when you go even further down and analyse it in even greater depth, it's also not going to be significant. So it wasn't necessary to comment on both of these, but it was necessary to comment on this one because this one is a change from this one. So that's kind of what you have to talk about, and that would have got your marks.